Hello everybody, it's me, John Lorden. Welcome to another episode of Itchy Mysteries. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today, back in the screening room. Today we are looking at a documentary that came out in 2014. This one is called A Murder in the Park. You can currently check it out on Netflix here in the US. It's also available on all kinds of other digital platforms. Most of them seem like it's for sale though, so I'm not sure if you'll find a whole lot of low prices on it. I think what I'm seeing it for is around 10 bucks if you have to pay for it. But hey, if you have Netflix in the US, you are ready to watch it for no additional cost. Let me read just a little bit of the plot summary to you to kind of start the conversation here, and then I'll really let you guys know how this film struck me. In 1999, just hours before his scheduled execution, convicted killer Anthony Porter's life was saved by a journalism class from Northwestern University, led by renowned Innocence Project pioneer, Professor David Protas. The class seemingly found the real killer, Alstory Simon. And did you catch how that last sentence was phrased? They seemingly found the real killer? All right. When I first started watching this, I was about 10 minutes into it, and I was like, wow, this is almost like a case cracked. Like they're just spilling out all this information really quickly about Anthony Porter, about how these students found other information, got him released. I was kind of wondering, like 10 minutes into it, I'm like, where is this going to go? Like they're telling us the story so rapidly. I didn't realize that the actual story was more about that second guy that gets charged, Alstory Simon. And the interesting thing there is they actually have a confession, a videotaped confession from Alstory. But as the film goes on, you come to discover that that confession might not be all that it's cracked up to be. So in terms of it being kind of a traditional mystery like we cover typically on this show, it doesn't quite evolve in that way. It really gives you a lot of the mystery elements very quickly up front, but then there is a secondary mystery kind of hidden in it that, that kind of comes out, and that is, I guess the best way to phrase it is, with confessions like that, you know, I've talked in several videos before about police confessions and how sometimes those can't be very reliable. But can someone outside of a police force actually elicit a false confession? Well, this movie will certainly show you an example where it seems like that is precisely what has happened, and then all the fallout around that. This documentary is done in a bit of an interesting way. They mix together a lot of traditional elements like interview footage with the people that are involved. They try to get all of the key players, but a few of them won't be interviewed for the film. The film is very clear about telling you who would not be interviewed for the film as it progresses. There is some dramatizations that are worked into it, so you get a very good sense of the actual crime, which is the unfortunate murder of two people at a swimming pool park area. But the dramatizations work very well to really kind of show you some of the problems in terms of understanding the truth of what happened on that night. And then there's also this other element where they use some graphics and they use old photographs, and they do it in a really, really good way. I was really impressed with how they laid out the case for, is Anthony Porter really the killer of these two people? During the first half, I almost felt like it was a little too geared toward that message. I was really starting to question, like, is this piece biased? Are they really just going to push this one thought and that is it? But they do a fair job of also looking at the information against that conclusion, that Anthony Porter, basically the information that states that he is innocent. And when you weigh those two things, which they even show this, they have like a visual representation of a scale several times throughout the film, and they'll show you, you know, like the evidence of different witnesses kind of bouncing from one side to the other, and then the scale tilting. Once again, just a very cool visual description, or visual portrayal of that mindset. It really leaves you questioning the conclusion that these student journalists came to, and then beyond that, it gets to the point of suggesting that this professor could be indeed a very masterful manipulator of many, many people, including his own students, including the authorities in this case, including political figures that make changes based on these conclusions that are found by these students and then much later found out to not necessarily uphold or be necessarily true. The one thing I could knock this, well, there's a few things that I could knock this documentary for. First of all, the pace of it is very rapid. But once you get out of the elements of talking about the actual crime, it becomes a lot of talking about court proceedings and grand jury trials, and it gets extremely wordy, particularly in like the last third of it. And I know I'm a guy that does 30-40 minute YouTube videos here telling you it gets wordy, but it really even kind of hit me where I'm like, they are just jamming so much, and it is good relative information, but it's just coming at you at such a rapid pace that it's kind of hard to absorb it all. But there it is there. I mean, it's necessary that is there to really tell you how the story comes out. Outside of that, there is a lot of the footage that is, once again, talking head footage, which isn't uncommon with these documentaries. In terms of music, it was well used. It wasn't really keyed up to play on your emotions or something like that. But the biggest knock I have against this film is one of the things that the students are accused of is not interviewing everyone that was a witness to the crime. And this film doesn't interview the students, and it also doesn't necessarily note that they declined to be interviewed. And I would have really thought just from a humanity perspective that getting their story, their perspective on what happened would have been extremely interesting, particularly if you're considering that maybe their professor was manipulating them, having them look in very specific ways at very specific things to make certain outcomes happen. What do they think about that now with all the changes that have happened in the case since then? I really wanted to get their opinion on that, and unfortunately this movie didn't go that far. In the end, I do feel like it's slightly biased. It's really the story of the police department and the prosecutors, and it's really told from their perspective very well. The opposing perspective to that, you know, some people are looking at this professor now like what he's doing could have even been considered illegal at some point, but unfortunately they figured it out way after the statute of limitations ran out for most of those crimes. So I kind of get why the filmmakers maybe didn't want to charge right into that in terms of getting him and the students interviewed. I'm not positive. They might have tried to get him interviewed and he might have declined, but once again, you know, he was working with the team, and I'm sure someone in that team could have represented their point of view in the story and maybe given us some more insight into how he was aiming this investigation and kind of pointing things. There's also some commentary in here about private investigators, and you know, I've watched a lot of this type of material, and I have mixed feelings about private investigators. I've seen certain ones where I'm like, you know what, that seems like a stand-up person. They're truly looking for the truth. Yes, they sometimes do things that some people might look at and say, you know, is that ethical, that they're lying about their identity to try to get information and things like that. But this film portrays kind of the darker side of private investigators. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but in one particular case, an extremely dark side of a private investigator and how far he's willing to go to get someone to say something specifically. That's about as far as I want to take it. But this film is almost worth watching just to understand the dynamics of that particular scene and to understand how people can be manipulated into giving false confessions, even if they're not sitting in a jail cell, even if they're not sitting across from real officers. It's really, really tragic. As I was watching this, first of all, my head was just shaking like crazy. I was just constantly shaking my head, and I just had this feeling of like, oh my God, things got worse. Oh my God, things are getting worse. how could they do this? Things are getting even worse. Like, it was just this downhill slide. It's a really interesting twist in terms of how these movies usually play out. You start at kind of this real interesting peak where you're hearing this wonderful story about students doing what police couldn't do and catching the right guy, and then it just slides from there into, oh wait, they're not necessarily right. Oh wait, they're being manipulated by other people. Oh wait, now these people are being manipulated by other people. The media is being manipulated by people. It is crazy. And it looks like it all boils back to one kind of mastermind, which is somewhat insane. It's almost like watching the story of like a supervillain or something like that. I really can't believe the stuff that this guy pulled off. I don't know, just mind-blowing. What would I rate this? I think I would give it, I'd say a 6.5 out of 10. It is definitely not for everyone. The pace, like I said, towards the end, you're going to get a lot of dialogue about stuff that some people might not really care about. I think that's the biggest knock against it. The first 2/3 of it, I think most people will hang in on, but that last third gets really dicey, and it sucks because you want to get to the ending to see how this whole thing plays out. And it does have a very conclusive ending that is worth getting to. So just know that if you're watching it and you hit that kind of last third and you're like, uh-oh, John was right, just try to grin and bear it to get to the very end so you can see how the whole case kind of wraps up. But there is some very interesting turns, very interesting dialogue and perspective about confessions in general. And this is from a crime that happened in the 80s. So once again, there's not a whole lot of evidence in terms of DNA or things like that. So a lot of this case has to do with witness testimony. But when you have a master manipulator, what happens to that witness testimony? It's really, really interesting at that level to check out. So I think some of you out there will really enjoy it. I give it a 6.5. Basically, if you're interested in kind of the politics of these types of crimes or the legal aspect of it, I think that this will serve you very well. If you're really just looking for more of the mystery element, you're going to get a good dose of it in the beginning, but it will kind of taper off as the film goes on. So I think that's as fair as I could be with it. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you right back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.